A braided egg bread called challah originated with poor European families hundreds of years ago. Many challahs didn't even contain eggs because those peasants had no chickens. This is the original New York recipe made famous during the golden age of union bakeries, when those immigrants came from Europe after World War II and the women were too busy working to bake bread. The upper New York State farmland offered plenty of the richest ingredients, and New York bakeries enriched and perfected challah to become the best in the world. This is the simple process and recipe. The tall bakery-style loaf makes great French toast or full-size sandwiches. It makes 1.5 pound 18-inch long loaf, or 8 rolls. I have another video showing many ways to braid this dough into traditional or round loaves. They all freeze well if you can keep from eating the whole thing hot out of the oven. Start by putting 3 eggs in some warm water to bring them to room temperature. We don't want to add cold eggs to the dough. Then take the first secret ingredient, which is saffron, the most expensive spice you can buy, so just use a little pinch of it. Put it into a couple tablespoons of water and bring it just to a boil. A microwave is great for that. Then put the eggs and the saffron aside for a while, letting it steep until it turns to a strong yellow tea. Add sugar, salt, and yeast. Use instant dry yeast. It's the same as regular dry yeast, except more organisms per gram, and it doesn't need to be proofed. Instant yeast was used for all breads at the New York bakeries. Then add the second secret ingredient, which is malt. It helps the yeast develop and adds a subtle brewed flavor. Add unbleached bread flour next. All professional recipes are by weight, not by volume. 1 cup of flour has a different weight depending upon the brand of flour and how much is packed in a cup. Measuring by weight makes it easy to multiply or divide a recipe and eliminates the need to sift the flour. A small kitchen or postal scale is as valuable a tool as a spoon. Flour is the most important flavor component of bread, so use a high-quality bread flour with at least 12% protein and malted barley listed on the package. I prefer King Arthur bread flour, an American hard winter wheat with a very low ash content. Lots more on flour in my other video. If you must use all-purpose flour, you can add 20 to 30 grams of vital wheat gluten to increase the protein to bread flour level. After stirring the dry ingredients together, we're ready to add the wet ingredients, starting with a flavorless pure vegetable oil. When adding the eggs next, break each one into a small glass dish and look at it under a light to make sure that there's no blood spots, shells, or impurities. Break 1 egg into your hand and let the white run through your fingers into the glass dish. Add the yolk to the dough and save the white for later. Put an empty bowl on the scale and zero the scale out. Pour the saffron tea into the bowl. Add water to the bowl to the recipe amount, using the water to rinse all the saffron into the bowl, giving the challah that golden color and that subtle aromatic flavor. If you spray or oil a measuring spoon, honey will slide right off it without sticking, so add your favorite kind of honey. Stir the whole thing up with any utensil, just enough so there's no dry stuff stuck to the bottom. Dump it out onto a mixing board or put the bowl into a mixer with a dough hook. Knead it medium fast for 2 minutes to make sure it's fully mixed, and then let it rest for 10 minutes so the yeast begins working. You'll see after 10 minutes how much more elastic the dough becomes when you start mixing. Knead it on medium for 8 more minutes. You may have to occasionally scrape the sides. Then stop to check the dough by sticking your finger in and seeing if anything sticks to your finger. Also by pinching the dough and pulling about 1 inch to see if it tears. If it tears or sticks, knead for up to 8 more minutes, stopping to check again every 2 minutes. When the dough appears stretchy while pulling away from the sides of the bowl, it's kneaded enough and ready to rise. First, prepare a bowl by putting about a teaspoon of oil in it and rubbing it around so the dough won't stick. Flour a board and empty the dough out onto it. Form the dough into a ball and put the ball into the oiled bowl. Cover the bowl with a pizza pan, plastic wrap, or damp towel and put it aside for 45 minutes to an hour in a damp place between 78 and 90 degrees Fahrenheit, 25 to 32 centigrade. Prepare your bread pan. I'm using a 4-inch deep Pullman loaf pan that makes an 18-inch long, pound-and-a-half loaf. Oil the pan lightly, just like we did with the bowl. After the dough has risen and it's doubled in size, you should be able to poke your finger in and watch it slowly resume its shape. Dump it onto the scale and take note of the weight, because we're going to divide it into 3 equal amounts. While I'm doing that, I'd like to tell you about my other video on how to make a proofing box very inexpensively, so you won't have to cover dough while it's rising, and you'll always get a consistent rise, no matter what temperature or humidity your kitchen is. Okay, roll each ball into a strand by pressing down and moving your hands outwards as you roll. Then, without moving your hands outwards, press and roll the strand until all the air bubbles are worked out of the dough. We're going to do the simplest 3-strand braid, since the braid will only be seen from the top of the loaf. Pinch the 3 strands together at one end to join them, then braid them, and pinch the other end together when you're done. Using the loaf pan as a measure next to your braided challah, fold the pinched ends under and scrunch the whole thing together so that it fits into the pan. Cover the pan or put it into a proofing box for 45 minutes to an hour until it rises to just under the pan top. Don't overproof it. Better to underproof it because it will rise more in the oven. After the loaf has risen, very gently brush it with the egg white. Don't press too hard or the loaf will collapse because it's full of air. Sprinkle on any optional toppings like poppy seed, sesame seed, or in this case, black sesame seed. Then pop it into the oven for 22 to 30 minutes at 350 degrees Fahrenheit, 175 Celsius. When it comes out, let it cool completely and then depan it by shaking it upside down. And there we have it, a beautiful challah. I like to cut it in half and freeze each half separately. Soft, chewy, and so delicious you'll never buy or make a different challah again.